I remember the exact moment I felt the first prick of unease in my marriage. It was a Tuesday evening, and I had just returned from another long day at the office. The sun was dipping low as I parked in our driveway, the June heat still radiating off the asphalt. Pushing open the front door, I was greeted by the familiar scent of home, a mix of my wife's cooking and the faint hint of vanilla from the candle she liked to burn on the mantel. "Hey, honey, I'm home," I called out, loosening my tie. Our golden retriever Max trotted up to welcome me, his tail wagging eagerly. Everything appeared normal at first glance. The kitchen light was on and I heard the clatter of dishes. My 15-year-old son, Jason, was at the table, earbuds in, finishing up homework. He gave me a quick nod and a half smile, the typical reserved greeting of a teenager. My wife, Emily, stood at the stove stirring a pot of marinara sauce. She flashed me a warm smile over her shoulder. "Welcome back. Dinner's almost ready," she said in that sweet, familiar way of hers. For a moment, I felt the tension of the day melt away. This was my haven, a cozy suburban home in North Carolina, a loving family, the routine we'd built over 16 years of marriage. I kissed Emily on the cheek and peered into the pot. "Smells great," I said, wrapping an arm around her waist. She leaned into me briefly, but I noticed something odd, a subtle stiffening, as if my touch startled her. It was so slight I almost missed it. A year ago, she would have turned and kissed me properly. Now, she gave a quick peck and stirred the sauce again, avoiding my eyes. A flicker of doubt crossed my mind, but I brushed it away. Maybe she was just tired. She had mentioned a busy day running errands. I moved to wash my hands at the sink. "How was your day?" I asked. "Fine," she replied lightly, not elaborating. "I did some grocery shopping, went to the gym, and caught up with an old friend for lunch." Her tone was breezy, but something in it made me glance up. Emily was focused on the stove, perhaps a little too much. "Old friend?" I repeated, reaching for a towel. Jason looked up from his homework, suddenly interested. She nodded. "Yeah, from high school. Remember I told you about the reunion coming up? Well, I found one of my old classmates on Facebook. We decided to meet up since he was in town early." My stomach did a weird little flip, though I couldn't pin down why. There was nothing inherently wrong with that. We were both approaching 40, and reconnecting with old friends was normal. I'd missed my last high school reunion because of a work trip, but Emily had gone to hers. I vaguely recalled her mentioning a few names afterward, people she was happy to see again. "Who did you meet?" I asked casually, trying not to sound like I was interrogating her. She turned off the burner and faced me with 2 plates of spaghetti, handing one to me. "You probably don't remember him. His name is Daniel Carter. We were on the yearbook committee together. It was just a quick lunch to catch up, nothing exciting." I accepted the plate, studying her face for any sign of discomfort. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Or maybe I was imagining it. "Daniel Carter rings a bell," I lied. Truthfully, I didn't recall the name, but I didn't want to seem indifferent. Jason was pulling out his earbuds now. "Is that the guy who was quarterback back in your day, Mom?" he asked, clearly having eavesdropped enough to catch the name. Emily let out a light laugh that sounded genuine. "No, that was David Carter. And no relation. Danny was just a friend." I smirked at my son. Teenage ears were always perked for gossip. "Well, that's nice you got to catch up," I said, twirling some pasta on my fork. "Maybe I'll meet him at the reunion if he goes." "Maybe," she said. Then she quickly changed the subject, asking Jason about school and soccer practice. Dinner continued normally after that, but I couldn't shake a minor sense of something being off. It was in the little things. The way Emily's phone, face down on the counter, kept lighting up with notifications that she ignored. The way she was quicker to clear the plates and retreat to the kitchen once we were done eating. Or how she seemed unusually distracted, even when Jason excitedly described scoring a goal at practice. I noticed her smiling and nodding at him, but her mind seemed elsewhere. Later that evening, after cleaning up, I found myself alone on the couch. The TV murmured some football game I wasn't really watching. Emily had excused herself early, claiming a headache and an early morning plan to go jogging. It wasn't completely out of character. She'd taken up morning runs recently, but something about the way she said goodnight felt distant. Jason had gone upstairs to play video games before bed. I considered talking to him about his mother, asking if he noticed anything different about her lately. But I stopped myself. It felt unfair to put him in the middle of my vague concerns. Instead, I tried to pinpoint why I felt uneasy. Our marriage had its rhythms, its ebbs and flows. We weren't the infatuated newlyweds we once were, but we were comfortable, I thought. Sure, we'd had a few rough patches, times when work stress or parenting had pulled us taut, but we always came through okay. Emily and I never screamed at each other, never went to bed angry, and always said I love you at least once a day. I realized with a twinge of guilt that maybe I'd been coasting, taking our life for granted. At 40, approaching middle age, maybe both of us were feeling the weight of routine. Was that all this was? A phase of restlessness that would pass? I hoped so. As I climbed into bed that night, Emily was already asleep or pretending to be. I watched her for a moment in the glow of the nightlight. Her brown hair fanned on the pillow, face turned away. I wanted to reach out to pull her close like I used to, but something held me back. A whisper of doubt I couldn't quite quell. I closed my eyes and told myself I was imagining things. After all, tomorrow was a new day, and maybe this unease was just in my head. Little did I know, it was the quiet before the storm, the last few moments of innocence before my world began to crack. Chapter 2. Over the next week, the subtle signs multiplied, and my unease grew harder to ignore. It started the very next morning. I woke up early, determined to make us both coffee before Emily left for her jog, but I found the kitchen empty and a note on the counter. Went running early. See you at breakfast, Em. I frowned, stirring sugar into my mug. Emily usually ran around 6 a.m., but it was barely 5:30 when I came downstairs. I glanced out the window, expecting to catch a glimpse of her neon pink running jacket on the sidewalk. Nothing. The street was quiet in the dawn light. Perhaps she decided to hit a different trail today, I reasoned. Still, it struck me as odd that she left so early. By the time she returned, I was dressed for work and flipping pancakes for Jason. Emily slipped in through the front door wearing her running clothes and a sheen of sweat. Morning, I greeted cheerfully, trying to keep my tone light. You're back early. Pancake? She jumped slightly at my voice. She hadn't seen me at the stove. Oh, morning. Sure, pancake sounds great, she said, smiling quickly. Her face was flushed, a few loose strands of hair sticking to her forehead. I stepped closer to hand her a plate and caught an unfamiliar scent, something distinctly masculine, like a woodsy cologne mixed with her sweat. It was faint, gone in a second as she moved past me, but I knew I hadn't imagined it. I forced myself to act normal. How was your run? I asked. Good, tiring, she replied between gulps of water. She didn't meet my eyes, busying herself with peeling off her jogging gloves. I pushed a little harder than usual today. You sure did. Out the door before sunrise, I noted casually. She paused only a fraction of a second. Couldn't sleep well, so I figured why not get an early start, she said lightly. Besides, I have a full day ahead. Lots of errands. I felt Jason's inquisitive eyes flick between us. He was devouring pancakes at the table, clearly sensing some tension. I didn't want to worry him, so I dropped the topic. Emily rushed upstairs to shower. Moments later, I heard the hairdryer blowing. I joined Jason at the table, heart quietly pounding. That scent on her clothes, where could it have come from at dawn? Perhaps she crossed paths with a male jogger or hugged a neighbor. It made no sense, and leaving so early with no notice was unlike her. Dad, are you okay? Jason asked, pulling me out of my thoughts. I realized I'd been absently pushing a pancake around my plate. Yeah, bud. Just thinking about a work meeting, I fibbed with a small smile. No need to burden him with my suspicions. Once I got to the office, I tried to focus on spreadsheets and client emails, but my mind kept drifting back to Emily. By lunchtime, I gave in and decided to do something I'd never done before. Check our joint bank account in detail. Normally, Emily handled the day-to-day finances, grocery shopping, paying the utility bills, while I took care of investments and the mortgage. We trusted each other completely, so I never felt the need to micromanage her spending. But now I was looking for anything out of the ordinary. It didn't take long to find a few red flags. 3 days ago, a $120 charge at a restaurant downtown, the same day she claimed to have caught up with an old friend. We rarely spent that much on lunch for two, even at a nice place. My jaw tightened as I scrolled further. There was another charge last week for a mid-range hotel in the next town over, $250 at the Green Willow Inn. We hadn't had any recent family trips or visiting guests to justify that. I stared at the hotel charge, my heart thudding dully. The date was a Friday 2 weeks ago. That evening, I'd been stuck late at work for a quarterly review meeting. I remember because I got home near 9 p.m. Emily had mentioned taking Jason to a movie that night. Was that a lie? If she was at a hotel, my stomach churned. My rational side tried to intervene. Perhaps she booked it for someone else? Or helped a friend with a wedding reservation? It seemed far-fetched. Emily wasn't close enough to anyone who'd asked that of her without mentioning it to me. The rest of the day was a blur. I went through the motions at work, barely contributing in meetings. By the time I drove home, I had resolved to confront her about the charges, at least indirectly. That evening, as we cleaned up dinner dishes, a simple pizza delivery as neither of us felt like cooking, I cleared my throat. "Oh, by the way, Em," I began, keeping my tone even, "I saw a charge from Green Willow Inn on our card. Did we book something there?" Her back was to me as she loaded the dishwasher. I saw her shoulders tense for a split second. Then she turned, brow furrowed in manufactured confusion. "Green Willow Inn? Not that I recall. When was it?" "Last Friday of the month," I said, watching her carefully. "Maybe it's fraud? Should I call the bank?" She dried her hands slowly, a dish towel twisting between her fingers. "Oh, wait, I think I know what that was," she said, perking up as though just remembering. "It was a surprise for you, actually." "For me?" I blinked, trying to keep my face neutral. She went on quickly. "Our anniversary is coming up and I was thinking of surprising you with a little weekend getaway. The charge might have been a deposit or something. I guess the surprise is ruined now." She gave a little apologetic laugh. Our 17th anniversary was indeed in a couple of months. Green Willow Inn. It was a quaint place by a lake about an hour away. We'd spent a night there years ago for an anniversary. Her explanation sounded almost plausible. Almost. Except she had claimed the friend lunch happened on that date. And typically, hotels didn't charge the full amount as a deposit far in advance. Usually just a smaller hold. Besides, she didn't have that kind of track record of planning elaborate surprises. Usually we chose vacation spots together. Still, confronting her with my doubts outright felt premature. I forced a smile. "Oh, wow. Well, I'm sorry for spoiling it." Her relief was palpable as she smiled back, stepping forward to hug me. "It's okay. It wasn't set in stone anyway." I held her, my hands steady on her back, trying to see if I still caught a whiff of that cologne. Nothing now but her usual floral shampoo. As she squeezed me, I felt her trembling slightly. Or maybe I imagined it. The hug lasted a second too long, as if she was checking my reaction. I kissed the top of her head. "I appreciate the thought," I said softly. "Maybe we can still go, act surprised and all." She pulled back, looking up at me. There was a flicker of guilt, or was it sadness, in her eyes before she masked it. "Maybe," she replied, turning away to finish the dishes. That night, I lay in bed with a storm of thoughts raging. She had lied to my face. I was now almost certain of it. The hotel, the expensive lunch, the early morning outings. The pieces were adding up in the worst way. But a part of me still desperately wanted it to be a misunderstanding. Perhaps I should give her the benefit of the doubt, I thought. After all, I hadn't actually seen anything damning with my own eyes. Still, my instincts screamed that something was very wrong. I replayed every small detail. Her nervous excuses, the strange scent on her clothes, the uncharacteristic expenditures she tried to hide behind half-truths. My wife was keeping secrets from me. Dangerous secrets that could break our family. Staring up at the dark ceiling, I felt anger and hurt twist in my gut. I needed to know the truth. If my suspicions were right, I couldn't let this betrayal go unanswered or let her continue deceiving me. But I also knew I had to be smart. Confronting her without solid proof might just drive the lies deeper underground. No, I had to catch her in the act or gather undeniable evidence. I needed to see it with my own eyes. Only then could I confront her, and him, head-on. Beside me, Emily shifted in her sleep, oblivious to the turmoil raging inside me. I listened to her steady breathing, a sound that had once been comforting but now felt foreign. In that moment, I silently resolved. I would find out what was truly going on, no matter what it took. And if she really was cheating with this old friend from high school, I would make sure there were consequences. I closed my eyes, heart pounding with resolve and dread. The calm, ordinary life I knew was slipping through my fingers, and I was determined to grab hold of the truth before it vanished completely. Chapter 3 2 days later, I set my plan into motion. By now, I was running on caffeine and anxiety, having barely slept. Emily's behavior had normalized just enough to almost make me doubt myself. She was attentive to Jason, pleasant with me, and went about her routines without any glaring red flags. But I couldn't forget the evidence I'd found or the lies she'd spun. If anything, her veneer of normalcy only made me more determined to uncover the truth hiding beneath it. Friday arrived, the day I suspected she might meet him again. The previous night, Emily casually mentioned she had some shopping to do in the next town over. Maybe lunch with a girlfriend. She tossed it out so offhandedly while we watched TV that I might have missed it if I weren't on high alert. I nodded and kept my face neutral, but inside my instincts were screaming that this was another cover story. That morning, I left the house at my usual time, dressed in my work clothes and carrying my briefcase. I kissed Emily goodbye and ruffled Jason's hair as he ate his cereal. "Have a good day at school, champ," I said. "I'll be home a bit late, lots of work." A tiny pang of guilt hit me as I lied to my son, but it couldn't be helped. In truth, I'd cleared my schedule. I informed my boss I had a personal matter and would be out that day. Fortunately, I had plenty of vacation days banked. I drove out of the neighborhood, looped around a few blocks, and parked my car under some trees on a side street with a clear view of our house. From there, I waited. Minutes ticked by like hours. I drummed my fingers on the steering wheel, trying to calm my racing heart. What if I was wrong and she really was just going shopping? But then why lie about who with? And why the hotel charge? No, I was certain enough to do this. I only hoped I could keep my emotions in check if I saw something. About 40 minutes after I'd left, I saw our garage door open. Emily's car backed out. I slunk lower in my seat as she drove past. Not that she would have expected to see my car lurking in the neighborhood. She looked nice, hair done, sunglasses on, wearing a blue sundress I hadn't seen in a long time. My chest tightened. She used to wear that dress on special dates with me. I waited until she was a good distance ahead, then started my car and followed. Keeping several cars behind her on the road, I trailed her out of our suburb and onto the highway. The morning sun was bright, traffic modest. I stayed careful not to get too close. At one point, she took an unexpected exit ramp and I had to cut off a delivery truck to keep up, earning a blaring horn. My hands were sweating on the wheel. Emily headed toward the neighboring town, the one where the Green Willow Inn was located. My mouth went dry as she indeed took the turnoff toward the inn. Any remaining hope that this was innocent faded. I eased off the gas and followed at a distance down the rural road lined with pine trees until the quaint, two-story lodge came into view. The Green Willow Inn sat near a quiet lake, mostly used by couples for romantic getaways. On a weekday morning, its parking lot was sparsely occupied. I pulled off onto the shoulder just before the entrance, partially obscured by bushes. From there, I had a partial view of the lot in the front entrance. Emily's car rolled in and parked. I recognized it even from afar. She stepped out, checked her phone, and stood by the car as if waiting for someone. I grabbed my camera, a small digital one I'd brought, preferring it over my loud cell phone shutter, and zoomed in, snapping a couple of shots of her alone. She paced slightly, looking around. A minute later, another vehicle arrived, a charcoal gray SUV. It pulled in next to her. My pulse pounded in my ears as a tall man stepped out. Even from a distance, I could recognize the confident stance and the wave of his hand. It was Daniel. He looked about my age, athletic build, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt. As soon as Emily saw him, she broke into a smile that I hadn't seen in a long time, a smile of pure excitement. I clenched my jaw as Daniel walked over and enveloped my wife in a hug. Through the camera lens, I saw her melt into his arms, her face nuzzling against his shoulder. They held each other longer than any friendly hug would last. I clicked the camera, capturing the embrace. When they finally pulled apart, he said something that made her laugh. I couldn't hear from where I sat, but I could imagine the flirty banter. Then, to my further agony, he leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't a peck on the cheek. His hand was on her waist, hers on his chest, as their lips met. Even across the distance, even with the camera jittering slightly in my shaking hand, I saw the unmistakable intimacy of the kiss. I snapped photo after photo, heart hammering, visions swimming with tears of rage. That was my wife, my life, in another man's arms, kissing him like she used to kiss me. In that moment, something in me broke, a mix of pain and fury surging like a wildfire. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles were white. I had to fight every urge to storm out of the car and confront them on the spot. But I didn't. With sheer force of will, I stayed put, reminding myself why I was here. Evidence. I needed proof, and I was getting it. Confronting them now would only alert them and potentially ruin any chance of a calculated, thorough fallout. They had no idea I was watching, and that element of surprise was now my greatest weapon. Emily and Daniel, oblivious to my presence, walked arm in arm toward the inn's entrance. He kept his hand on the small of her back. She looked up at him with adoration that made my stomach churn. I continued snapping pictures until they disappeared through the front door of the inn. They were likely checking in. I debated my next move. Part of me wanted to barge into the lobby and catch them red-handed, but I suspected they'd get a room, and I had no sure way of following without being seen. Instead, I decided to wait. I texted my boss an update, claiming my personal emergency was still ongoing, then settled in for what would be the longest wait of my life. An hour passed, then two. I sat in that car with the AC off, the noise might obscure any sights or sounds, sweating and seething, my mind conjuring painful images of what might be happening behind those closed doors. At one point, I realized my hands were shaking uncontrollably. I forced myself to breathe slowly, counting backwards from 10 again and again. Calm. Stay calm. You need to see this through. I repeated the mantra to myself. After just over 2 hours, around midday, the front door of the inn finally opened. My heart lurched into my throat as I saw them emerge together. Emily's hair was a bit disheveled, her cheeks slightly flushed even at a distance. Daniel looked smug and relaxed, walking close by her side. I raised the camera again, capturing them strolling back to the parking lot. They stopped by her car, talking. Emily looked reluctant, her hand lingering on his arm. He brushed a strand of hair from her face and gave her one more brief kiss. Click, I caught that too. I wished I could hear their conversation. She appeared to be saying goodbye, probably because she had to pick up Jason from school soon. Daniel nodded and they shared a final, tight embrace. Then he opened her car door chivalrously and she slipped inside. With a last little wave, she drove off. I stayed hidden until Daniel returned to his SUV and left the lot. He passed right by me on the road. I slouched and averted my face, though he had no reason to glance my way. Once both of them were safely gone, I finally released the breath I'd been holding. I felt sick to my core. Even though I'd suspected it, even though I'd steeled myself, seeing the betrayal with my own eyes was a knife to the heart. My hands were clammy as I flipped through the photos on the camera's tiny screen. Each one a dagger of confirmation. Emily in another man's embrace, their lips pressed together, their loving gazes. I had all the proof I needed and more. I allowed myself a few minutes to cry in the solitude of my car. It was a raw, voiceless sobbing, tears streaming down my face as I punched the steering wheel repeatedly in frustration. The pain was immense, but in that pain a new resolve began to harden. Whatever love I still felt was eclipsed by a burning sense of betrayal and a need for justice, for revenge on those who thought they could rip my world apart and walk away unscathed. When my eyes were dry and my breathing steadied, I knew the next step. I needed an ally, someone who hated this situation as much as I did. And I had a good idea who that might be. I recalled that during one of our rare casual chats about her high school reunion, Emily had mentioned Daniel was married. He married some girl from a different school, I think, and has a kid, she'd said offhandedly weeks ago when flipping through the reunion yearbook. That detail came back to me now, crystal clear. If Daniel was married, it meant there was another person whose life was being shattered by this affair. His wife. She deserved to know the truth. And perhaps, I thought, she could be an unexpected ally in what was coming next. That afternoon back at home, I sat at my computer and logged onto Facebook. My hands still trembled, but my purpose was clear. It didn't take long to find Daniel Carter's profile. His picture showed the same charming grin I'd seen as he held my wife. His profile was fairly open, and listed as married to Lisa Carter. A quick click on her name led me to a photo of a pretty blonde woman cradling a toddler on her lap. Her smile was warm, happy, and unsuspecting. Anger flared in me again. That woman and her child had no idea, just like I hadn't. We were collateral damage to Emily and Daniel's selfish fling. I sent Lisa a private message that was short and direct. Hi, you don't know me, but I have some information about your husband Daniel that I think you would want to know. It's about him and my wife. Please contact me. I included my phone number. It was one of the hardest messages I've ever had to write, knowing it would likely destroy a stranger's world. But she deserved the truth as much as I did. I only hoped she would believe me. Fortunately, I had proof if she needed it. After that, I began transferring the photos from my camera to a secure folder on my laptop, backing them up in multiple places. I also wrote down everything I'd observed that day in detail while it was fresh. Times, locations, anything said that I could remember, though I heard little. I noted their body language. If I was going to go down the legal road, evidence and accuracy could be crucial. As evening fell, Emily and Jason returned home. She had picked him up from school as usual and then swung by a few stores. She really did have shopping bags, playing her role to perfection. I watched her unpack some new clothes and trinkets, chattering to me about trivial details of her day out. I nodded and made non-committal sounds at the right times, acting distant because I was emotionally exhausted. She probably assumed I was tired from work. Jason prattled on about his day, and I forced smiles and responded where appropriate. Inside, I felt hollow. It took every ounce of self-control not to explode at her lies. But the time would come. Not yet. Late that night, after everyone was in bed, my phone buzzed. A new message. This is Lisa, Daniel's wife. What is it you need to tell me? I stared at the glowing screen, taking a deep breath. Then I quietly slipped out of the bedroom and went downstairs, steeling myself to have one of the most difficult conversations of my life. Chapter 4. I stepped outside into the cool night air, my hands trembling as I dialed the number Lisa had messaged me from. I walked to the far end of our backyard, out of earshot of the house, heart pounding. After a couple of rings, a tentative female voice answered. Hello? Hi, Lisa? I whispered, glancing back at the dark windows of my home. This is Andrew, Emily's husband. There was a shaky exhale on the other end. Yes, Andrew, she said. I got your message. What is this about? Are you saying something about my husband Daniel and your wife? Even though I'd initiated this, I struggled to get the words out. Saying it aloud would make it all the more real for both of us. I'm afraid so, I managed. I have reason to believe that Daniel and my wife are having an affair. A sharp intake of breath. What? That can't be. There must be a mistake, she stammered, denial and fear mingling in her tone. I closed my eyes, feeling a surge of sympathy. She didn't know anything yet. I was about to upend her world. As gently as I could, I said, I'm sorry, I know how insane it sounds. I wouldn't have contacted you if I wasn't sure. I saw them together today at the Green Willow Inn. Silence, then a soft, shaky, oh my God, as the reality began to dawn on her. I took photos, I continued quietly. I can show you. I just thought you should know the truth. She let out a muffled sob, or perhaps she'd put a hand over her mouth. When she spoke again, her voice was tight, holding back tears. I need to see them. I can't just take this in without. She trailed off. Of course, I said quickly. I didn't expect you to. Would you be willing to meet in person? I can show you everything. She hesitated for only a moment. Yes, please. Tomorrow, if possible. We agreed to meet the next morning at a cafe halfway between our towns. She lived one town over, which made sense since that's where the inn was and likely where Daniel worked or spent time. We kept the call brief, both of us shaky and emotionally raw. I think we each wanted to break down, but neither wanted to do it over the phone with a stranger. Before we hung up, Lisa's voice hardened slightly, a hint of anger piercing through the pain. Thank you for telling me. I never would have known. He always seemed so. God. She swallowed. We'll talk tomorrow. This isn't your fault, but I'm sorry you're going through this too. Likewise, I replied softly. Try to get some rest. It was a futile suggestion. I knew neither of us would sleep well, but it felt like the polite thing to say. Inside, I found I couldn't go back to bed. Not next to Emily, not after talking to Lisa. Instead, I spent the night on the couch, claiming an upset stomach. I doubt Emily believed me. She eyed me strangely in the morning, but at that point I didn't care. Dawn couldn't come fast enough. The next morning was Saturday. I told Emily I needed to go into the office for a bit to handle an urgent project. It wasn't unusual for me to work occasional weekends, so she didn't question it much, merely arching an eyebrow at the short notice. Jason was heading to a friend's house for the afternoon, so he barely noticed my departure. I arrived at the little cafe at 10 o'clock a.m. sharp. It was a quiet, locally owned spot, the kind with worn leather chairs and a few booths by the windows. Only a couple of patrons lingered with their coffees. I spotted Lisa immediately. She was seated at a corner table, hands clasped around a mug of tea that she clearly wasn't drinking. Early 30s, blonde hair pulled into a ponytail, dressed in jeans and a hoodie. She looked like she had thrown herself together in a hurry. Understandably, I approached slowly, and when our eyes met, she gave a small, sad smile of recognition. "Andrew?" she asked softly. "Yes," I nodded. "Lisa." We shook hands awkwardly, as if this were some mundane meeting and not the collision of two lives in crisis. I sat down across from her. Up close, I could see her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying recently. I probably didn't look much better. Neither of us touched the pleasantries we might have under normal circumstances. After a beat of heavy silence, I said, "I brought the pictures," and I wrote down what I saw. I patted my laptop bag. Lisa inhaled deeply, steeling herself. "Okay, show me." I pulled out my laptop and powered it on, fingers trembling slightly on the keyboard as I opened the folder of photos. I hesitated, giving her one more warning glance. "Are you sure? They're... It's not easy to see." Her jaw clenched. "I need to, please." I turned the screen toward her and clicked through the images one by one. The pictures were time-stamped from the day before. There was Emily in her blue sundress wrapped in Daniel's arms in the parking lot. Another of them kissing, unmistakably intimate. A shot of them walking into the inn together. Lisa brought a hand to her mouth, a strangled sound escaping her as tears welled up. "Oh God," she whispered. "That's him. And that's your wife?" "Yes," I said quietly. My own heart cracked at the sight of my wife in those photos, but I'd already spent my tears. Now I felt a grim resolve watching someone else go through the same pain. A few patrons were glancing over, sensing the emotional moment. Lisa wiped her eyes quickly and I gently angled the screen away for a moment to give her some privacy. She took a shaky breath. I can't believe it. I knew something was off, but I never imagined... She trailed off, voice breaking. I waited patiently. After a moment, she straightened, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear with trembling fingers. "Tell me everything you saw," she said, her tone firmer now, laced with anger beneath the hurt. I recounted yesterday's events quietly, following Emily to the inn, seeing them meet, the time frame, them leaving. I mentioned how comfortable and loving they appeared, which was painful for both of us to acknowledge. Lisa listened, tears occasionally slipping free, but her expression gradually shifted from devastation to a kind of simmering fury. When I finished, she shook her head slowly, staring at her cold tea. "He told me he was at work yesterday. I even remember texting him around noon and he said he was in meetings and would call later." She let out a bitter laugh. "Meetings at a damn inn, apparently." I nodded, understanding all too well the gall of their lies. "Emily told me she was shopping and having lunch with a friend." We sat in silence for a moment, absorbing how deceitful they'd been. Then Lisa clenched her fist on the table. "I want to make them pay for this," she said quietly, intense pain and anger warring in her voice. She looked up at me, eyes flashing through the tears. "They think they can just destroy our families and get away with it? I won't let him. I won't let them." Her resolve ignited mine further. "Neither will I," replied. "They have no idea what's coming." We began to discuss options, speaking in low, urgent voices. First, the immediate decisions. Both of us wanted a divorce. There was no hesitation on that front. Lisa mentioned she had a toddler, a 2-year-old girl, and her face crumpled briefly as she thought of her child. "I have to protect my daughter from this mess," she said, voice quavering. "I can't stay with a man who would do something like this." I assured her I understood completely. We exchanged what we knew of divorce proceedings. I told her I planned to see a divorce attorney immediately, and she said she'd likely do the same. We would both quietly start the paperwork. Next, we turned to the idea of confronting them. Initially, I suggested each of us confronting our own spouse separately. But the more we considered it, the more it seemed inadequate. They had lied and cheated together. It felt fitting to expose them together as well. Perhaps we should catch them in the act, both of us present, I mused. That way they can't deny or spin the story. And it would be impactful. Lisa's brow furrowed in thought. If I confront Dan alone, he'll try to weasel out of it or turn it around. If we both confront them with evidence, they'll be cornered. A steel edge entered her tone. I want to see the look on his face when he realizes he's ruined himself. We both did. There was a grim satisfaction imagining that scenario, so we began formulating a plan. We needed to arrange another rendezvous for the cheaters and be there to crash it. Given that we now knew their usual pattern, we could either wait for them to plan their next meetup or entice them into one. We opted for the latter to control the timing. I explained an idea that had come to me in the early morning hours. If Emily believes I'm out of town or busy for a long stretch, and if Daniel believes you're away, they might jump at the chance to meet. We can create that opportunity. Lisa nodded slowly, catching on. I could tell Dan that I'm taking our daughter to visit my parents for a weekend, she said. He won't want to come. He hates going to my folks' house, so he'll expect to have the house to himself. Meanwhile, I could tell Emily I have a business trip or conference, something that takes me away overnight, I added, and maybe arrange for my son to stay over at a friend's place that night. If she thinks the house is empty and I'm gone, she might choose to meet him at our place. Or more likely, since your house would be empty, he might invite her there. Lisa frowned, considering. Dan might be wary of bringing her to our house, but if he knows I'm definitely gone overnight, he could. He's always been a bit complacent about our neighbors. And honestly, if he thinks he's safe from me walking in, he might risk it. We have a big fenced yard and our closest neighbor is half a mile away, so privacy isn't an issue. That detail was useful, an isolated house. They could indulge freely without fear of prying eyes, or so they'd think. We refined the plan further. We decided on the following weekend to give ourselves a few days to prepare. Lisa would tell Daniel that her mother was sick and she needed to go help out for a night or two, and she'd take their daughter along. She would actually take her daughter to her mother's to ensure the child was safe and away from what was to come. Then she'd quietly return early the next day with a spare key ready to catch him. I would similarly tell Emily that I had a work conference out of state over that weekend. Perhaps I'd even leave for the airport and then double back. We thought it through. I'd drop Jason at a friend's or maybe have him stay with his grandparents for the weekend, saying I didn't want him alone with just mom so she could relax. A subtle way to free her of parenting duties. Emily would likely welcome a break to go meet her friends, or rather, Daniel. We also exchanged more information to stay coordinated. Lisa would try to discreetly check Dan's phone or plans to see if he arranged the tryst once she gave him the opportunity. But even if she couldn't, we reasoned that once both spouses were supposedly gone, Daniel and Emily would likely contact each other to set something up. We'll have to be a little flexible, I said. They might choose your house or even a hotel again. But if your place is free, I suspect he'll prefer that to avoid spending money and to be more comfortable. Lisa agreed. Yes, and he might enjoy the thrill of bringing her into our bed, she added bitterly. He won't expect me to ever find out. A flash of pain went through me at that idea, just like it did for her, clearly. We shared a moment of mutual disgust. How had our spouses become people who could do this to us? Before we parted, we solidified our commitment. If the meeting happened at her house, we'd both be there waiting when they arrived, ready to confront. If it happened elsewhere, like a hotel, we'd adapt. Perhaps follow like I did before and then confront on site. One way or another, we would face them together. As we stood to leave, I said, one more thing. I plan to involve a lawyer right away. Also, North Carolina law. I lowered my voice, though no one was nearby. It allows me to sue an adulterer for damages. Alienation of affection. I intend to pursue that against Daniel. Lisa looked somewhat surprised, but then gave a small, fierce smile. Good. Hit him with everything you can. If you need any information from me for that, let me know. I'll be speaking to the lawyer too. Maybe not for that specifically, but to make sure I get full custody of my daughter and what I deserve in the divorce. We exchanged contact information and promised to stay in touch frequently over the coming days. We agreed to keep all this strictly between us, no warning our spouses or tipping our hand. Appear normal while the trap closed around them. As I walked her to her car, Lisa paused and touched my arm lightly. Thank you for telling me, she said quietly. I hate that we're in this situation, but I'm glad I'm not facing it alone. I nodded, offering a reassuring squeeze to her shoulder. We'll get through this, and they'll get what is coming. Her eyes hardened with resolve even as a tear slipped down her cheek. Yes, they will. We parted then, two strangers bonded by betrayal and a common goal. Driving away from the cafe, I felt a grim satisfaction. The pieces were lining up in our favor now. If Emily and Daniel thought they were in control, they were about to learn how terribly wrong they were. Chapter 5. The week leading up to our planned confrontation crawled by with agonizing slowness. Every day that I had to act normal around Emily was a test of endurance. Yet, in that time, I transformed my pain into purpose. There was a lot to prepare if I wanted to emerge from this mess with my life intact and ensure she and Daniel faced real consequences. On Monday, I scheduled an appointment with a reputable divorce attorney in town. Slipping away during my lunch break, I met with Ms. Karen Willis, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who had a no-nonsense demeanor. I'd known of her through a coworker's divorce. She was known to be tough and thorough. Sitting in her polished office, I laid out the situation in straightforward terms. My wife had been unfaithful, I had photographic proof, and I wanted to file for divorce on grounds of adultery. The words tasted bitter, but saying them aloud also steeled my resolve. Ms. Willis listened attentively, occasionally jotting notes. North Carolina is technically a no-fault divorce state, she explained, but marital misconduct like adultery can still influence certain outcomes, particularly alimony. Let's get some details. How long have you been married? 16 years, I replied. And you have a child, correct? Age? Yes, one son, Jason. He's 15. She nodded. Are you the primary earner? Yes, I work in finance. My wife works part-time at a local boutique, but I've been the main income source by far. Ms. Willis pursed her lips. All right, if we prove adultery, which your evidence should strongly support, your wife would be barred from receiving alimony under state law, given that you're the supporting spouse. Additionally, any marital assets spent on the affair could be factored in when we divide property. I felt a grim satisfaction at that, so she won't be able to take me to the cleaners after what she did. In theory, no, the lawyer affirmed. We'll document everything. You mentioned photos? I opened the folder I'd brought, prints of a few choice pictures of Emily and Daniel at the inn, as well as a written timeline of events and copies of the credit card statement with the hotel and restaurant charges. Highlighted, I slid them across the desk. Ms. Willis flipped through, her expression impartial but eyes widening slightly at the clear kiss captured in one image. This is solid evidence, she said. Judges don't always consider fault, but with something this flagrant in a long marriage, it will carry weight, especially if she tries to seek any form of support. I nodded, my jaw tight. I want primary custody of my son, I added. He's old enough to voice a preference, and I know he'll want to stay with me once he learns what happened. I don't intend to keep him from his mother entirely, but I want him with me. We can certainly push for that, she agreed. At 15, the court will heavily weigh his wishes, and if we present the affair as evidence of her poor judgment or unstable home environment, it could help your case, though custody is usually decided on child's best interest rather than punishing a parent's infidelity. Still, it doesn't make her look good. Just talking about Jason in this context twisted the knife in my heart. He adored his mother, this would devastate him. And that was another reason I was so angry. She was going to break our boy's heart too. I took a breath. Understood. I'll handle that part carefully with him. He doesn't know anything yet. Ms. Willis gave a sympathetic look. It's always hardest on the kids, I'm sorry. But preparing for custody early is wise. We then discussed division of assets. We had a house with a mortgage nearly paid off, 2 cars, both mostly in my name, savings accounts, retirement accounts, and various possessions. Typically, North Carolina splits marital assets equitably, she said. But if we can show she squandered funds on the affair, we can argue to adjust the split. Do you have an idea of how much might have been spent on it? I recalled the $250 hotel charge, the pricey lunch, possibly gifts or other unaccounted cash. Not entirely sure yet. A few hundred that I know of directly. There could be more I haven't found. We'll demand full financial disclosures. Also, since you're the one initiating, I'll draft a separation agreement with terms favorable to you. If she's feeling guilty or cornered, she may sign it to avoid a fight. especially if you offer something minor to sweeten the deal, like not going after her personal savings or so. I nearly scoffed at the idea of offering her anything generous, but I understood it was strategic. Honestly, I don't think she has much of her own savings, I said. She's relied on me for most expenses. All the more reason she'll be in a tough spot if cut off, Ms. Willis noted, matter of fact. We should also talk timeline. In NC, you must be separated for a year before the divorce is final. But we can get the process started now. We'll prepare the complaint citing adultery and get her served soon. That will start the clock. A year. It seemed like forever to technically still be married to this woman after what she did. But at least once she was served, there was no going back. I shifted in my seat. What about the other man? I asked, lowering my voice. I know the law allows a lawsuit against him for alienation of affection. Is that something you handle? Ms. Willis gave a thin smile. It is. Not many pursue it, but it's on the books. In our state, you can sue a third party who interfered in your marriage. It requires proving that you had a loving marriage and this person's actions destroyed it. From what you've shown me, you have a case. There have been multi-million-dollar awards in some instances. I didn't care as much about the money as the principle, though making Daniel pay dearly would be satisfying. I want to do it, I said firmly, even if it's just to drag him through the mud. He knew Emily was married, I'm certain of that. She nodded. It would be a separate civil case. We can file that after the divorce complaint or in parallel. It might give us leverage. Sometimes these suits prompt a settlement out of court if the defendant wants to avoid publicity. Are you open to settling, or would you want it to go to trial? I thought about it. A public trial might be juicy, but it could also be hard on Jason and perhaps on me. A big settlement, though, could secure Jason's college and my future. If he offers a substantial settlement, I'd consider it. Otherwise, I'm prepared to go the distance. Understood, the lawyer replied. Let's handle the divorce first and we'll line up the other suit accordingly. I'll start drafting paperwork. In the meantime, do not tip off your wife. We want to serve her when she least expects it. Do you know where she'll be available for service? Homework? I almost smiled at that. I had something more dramatic in mind. Actually, I expect to confront her this weekend about the affair. I'm coordinating with the other man's wife. We plan to catch them and, well, after that, I'll want her served immediately. Ms. Willis raised her eyebrows at my bold admission. Be careful, Andrew, she said slowly. I understand the desire for a confrontation, but keep your cool. Don't do anything that could be seen as threatening or violent. If there's a scene, let the shock do the work. In fact, having the wife of the other man present as a witness might even help. Just don't lay a hand on either of them, all right? Her concern was warranted. I could imagine how easily white-hot rage could erupt once I was face to face with the betrayal. I won't do anything stupid, I promised. We just want to expose them. With that, we wrapped up the meeting. I left with instructions to gather a few more financial documents and the assurance that the initial divorce complaint would be ready in a couple of days. I also discreetly paid the retainer from my personal savings account, money Emily had no visibility on. That week, I also quietly set up a new bank account solely in my name. One evening, I stayed late at work and transferred half of our joint checking into it, as well as a chunk of funds from our money market account. I didn't drain anything completely. I didn't want to alert Emily with missing money, but I safeguarded what I could. If things got ugly after she found out, I didn't want her to be able to empty our accounts out of spite. Additionally, I made sure to change the passwords on my personal email, our online banking login, which she rarely used anyway, and other important accounts. It might have been overkill, but I wasn't going to leave any backdoors open for revenge or snooping once everything blew up. Every night, Lisa and I checked in via text or brief calls, sharing any new developments. She had seen a lawyer as well and was preparing her own divorce filing. In her case, she intended to ask for full custody of her little girl in the house. He can go rot in some apartment with his mistress for all I care, she hissed during one call. Her anger was growing, and I couldn't blame her. Lisa also reported that she set the trap with Daniel. She told him her mother needed help over the coming weekend, and she'd be taking their daughter for an overnight visit from Friday to Saturday. As predicted, Daniel acted sympathetically concerned, but agreed that she should go. He even encouraged her to take her time and not rush back, which told us everything about how he intended to spend his own time. I think he's planning to have her over Friday night, Lisa told me on Wednesday. After I leave, of course. He's been in an annoyingly good mood, even offered to help me pack. The disgust in her voice was evident. He probably can't wait to shove me out the door so we can invite your wife into our bed. My grip tightened on my phone. It took effort to respond evenly. Then we'll give him the surprise of a lifetime. For my part, I laid the groundwork with Emily. On Thursday evening, I casually announced that I'd have to attend a regional managers meeting on Friday, and it would run late, possibly even into a Saturday workshop. They're putting us up in a hotel Friday night, I lied smoothly over dinner. Not exactly how I want to spend the start of the weekend, but it's mandatory. Emily paused with her fork in midair. For a split second, I thought I saw a flash of excitement in her eyes before she quickly blinked it away. Oh, that's too bad, she said, trying to sound merely mildly disappointed. I was hoping we could maybe go out for dinner or a movie. Her acting had improved. I'll give her that. But I knew her too well to miss the slightly forced tone. If she was truly disappointed, she'd have asked more questions or tried to persuade me to wiggle out of it. Instead, she simply said, I guess I'll have a quiet night then. Maybe I'll catch up on that new TV series. Maybe you could have a spa night or go shopping if you want, I offered, playing the considerate husband. You've been saying you need some me time. She shrugged, smiling faintly. I might do that. Or call one of the girls to hang out. Across the table, Jason was more visibly disappointed than she was. Dad, you're not going to be home Friday? You promised we could practice driving this weekend, he protested. I'd recently started teaching him how to drive and he was eager. I know, buddy. I'm sorry, I said, genuinely pained to let him down. We will. Saturday afternoon, okay? I'll be back by then for sure. He accepted that, turning his attention back to his food. Emily remained quiet and thoughtfully sipped her water. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind. No husband for a night, no kid at home. I had already arranged for Jason to stay over at his friend Mike's house Friday night under the guise of it being easier since I'd be away and so he could have fun. She was likely planning her rendezvous with relish now, thinking all the stars had aligned for her. It took a monumental effort not to glare at her across the table. Instead, I cleared the plates and went about the evening routine like nothing was amiss. We even watched a show together after Jason went to bed. She leaned against me on the couch and I let her, all the while sickened at how two-faced she was. She had no idea that I knew exactly what she was plotting behind that calm facade. When Friday morning came, I left home with a small suitcase as a prop, giving Emily a kiss on the cheek and ruffling Jason's hair. See you tomorrow, I said as naturally as possible. Emily wished me good luck at the meetings and said she'd miss me. The charade on both sides was almost over. I drove around the block, then parked on a side street and waited until I saw Jason's school bus pick him up. Not long after that, right on cue, Emily's car pulled out of the driveway. She was dressed casually, likely headed to work at the boutique for a few hours. Everything was normal, except nothing was. I spent the day making final arrangements. I checked in with Lisa. She was on the road to her mother's, legitimately going for the daytime to keep the story true, but she would head back toward town in the evening without Daniel knowing. We synchronized our timing. We'd both aim to be at her house around 7 p.m., assuming the cheaters would meet later in the evening once darkness gave more cover. Because I anticipated a possible need to prove the confrontation details, I purchased a small voice-activated recorder and slipped it in my pocket. I also had my phone and the camera ready in case more photos were needed. My lawyer's advice echoed in my head. Keep your cool. I was determined to, but I also prepped a couple of lines in my mind, things I was burning to say to Emily and Daniel when the moment came. By late afternoon, I drove to a spot about a mile from the Carter residence, a quiet country lane leading to their house, which sat back from the road down a long gravel driveway. I parked out of sight and waited for Lisa. Dusk was just beginning to settle, the sky tinged with orange and purple. My heart thudded in my chest with anticipation and nerves. This was it. Months of suspicion and weeks of planning were about to culminate in one explosive encounter. When I saw Lisa's car approaching in my rearview mirror, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. She pulled over next to me and I stepped out to meet her. The look on her face mirrored how I felt. Determined but anxious. Anger, tempered by a touch of sadness. We exchanged a terse nod. No smiles this time. The gravity of what we were about to do hung in the air between us. You ready? I asked quietly. She squared her shoulders. Ready as I'll ever be. We left her car there and together walked down the gravel driveway toward her house, staying in the shadows of the trees that lined it. She had given me the layout earlier: a modest ranch-style home, attached garage, big backyard. We planned to slip in through a side door that she would unlock and wait in the den off the living room. There we could hear and see the front entryway when they came in. As we approached the house, every crunch of gravel under our feet and chirp of crickets sounded unnaturally loud. Lisa keyed open a side door quietly, and we stepped inside into darkness. My heart was pounding so fiercely I wondered if I might actually pass out from the adrenaline. But one look at Lisa, her jaw set in determination despite the faint tremble of her hands, grounded me. We were doing this. Inside, the house was dim and silent. She guided me through a hallway into the den, and we settled behind the slightly ajar door. It felt surreal, hiding in the shadows of the home Lisa had made with Daniel, about to catch my wife walking through that very living room on the arm of this man. I clenched my fists, willing myself to stay calm, or at least controlled. We didn't have to wait long. Just after 8 p.m., we heard the faint crunch of tires on gravel outside. My muscles tensed. A car door slammed, then another. Through the gap in the door, I saw the foyer light Lisa had left off flicker on, triggered by the front door opening. Muffled voices floated in, jovial and familiar. It was them. Emily's laugh sounded, a pitch I recognized, the one she used when she was flirtatiously happy. My stomach turned. I felt Lisa stiffen beside me like a coiled spring. I placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, signaling to hold for just a moment more, to let them get fully inside, unaware of our presence. Through the crack, I caught sight of their figures stepping into the living room. Daniel's voice came, "I'll grab us a bottle of wine. Make yourself comfortable." I saw him, the same man from my photos, moving toward what I assumed was the kitchen, which was out of my view. Emily strolled in, looking around with curiosity and amusement. She was dressed in a red blouse and jeans, an outfit I faintly recognized but that she hadn't worn around me in a while. She had dolled up subtly, a touch more makeup, hair freshly styled. She had never been in this house before, I realized. She was taking it in. The audacity of her stepping into another woman's home like this, acting like a giddy lover on a date, made my blood boil. I exchanged one last look with Lisa. Her eyes shone with tears in the dim light, but her face was hard. We nodded to each other. It was time. I pushed the door open and stepped out briskly, Lisa right behind me. "I wouldn't get too comfortable if I were you," I said, voice ringing out like a gunshot in the quiet. Emily whirled around at the sound of my voice, and for a second, the tableau froze. Her face went pale, eyes widening in sheer shock as she saw me standing there. Behind her, Daniel had just re-entered carrying a wine bottle and 2 glasses. He stopped dead in his tracks, confusion and panic flooding his features as he registered me, and then his wife emerging from the shadows at my side. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The only sound was the quiet clink as the wine bottle in Daniel's hand bumped against one of the glasses he was holding. Emily looked as if she'd seen a ghost, her face drained of all color, one hand flying to her mouth. Daniel's eyes darted from me to Lisa, his cheeks flushing red, caught completely off guard. I broke the silence, my voice low and seething. "Surprised to see us?" Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Andrew," she croaked. "What? How?" She didn't finish her question because really, what could she ask? How long had I been there? How much did I know? The evidence was all around us, her presence in this house with him, the wine, the expectation of a romantic evening. There was no innocent explanation left. Lisa stepped forward, and I saw fury burning in her tear-filled eyes. "You disgusting cheating bastard," she hissed at Daniel. "Did you really think I'd never find out?" Daniel blanched. "Lisa, I thought you were at your mom's," he stammered, as if that were the issue at hand. He set the wine bottle and glasses down on the coffee table with a shaky hand. It's not what it looks like," he tried, the classic lie coming out automatically. I actually let out a short, harsh laugh at that. "Not what it looks like, really?" I snapped, striding fully into the living room. I could feel the adrenaline surging, but I kept my fists clenched at my sides. "Because it looks like my wife is here in your house, about to have a cozy night with you while your wife was away. Why don't you tell us what it really is, Daniel?" Emily turned to me, eyes wide with panic and tears. Andrew, please. I can explain, she said quickly, voice trembling. I raised a hand, cutting her off. Oh, I'd love to hear an explanation for months of lies and infidelity. Go on, Em. Explain how you accidentally tripped and fell into a motel with him. Explain the secret lunches, the hotel charges, the sneaking around. Explain how you chose to betray me and our son. My voice rose with each word, years of hurt and anger pouring out. She flinched as if struck, tears spilling down her cheeks. It just happened, she wailed softly. You have to understand I never meant to hurt you. Never meant to hurt me? I echoed, incredulous and livid. What did you think would happen, Emily? You were sleeping with another man, lying to my face day in and day out, and you somehow didn't think that would hurt me? Hurt Jason? At the mention of our son, she broke into sobs, covering her face with her hands. I made a mistake, she choked out. I was going to end it, I swear. Save it, I growled. You weren't going to end anything. You were enjoying this. I gestured around the room at the obvious date setup. Don't insult me with half-baked excuses. I've seen everything. I know everything. Meanwhile, Lisa had rounded on Daniel, who had the nerve to reach toward her in some placating gesture. She batted his hand away. How could you do this, Dan? To me? To our family? She demanded, voice cracking. I loved you. I trusted you. I was home raising our daughter while you... She couldn't finish, a sob of rage and sorrow taking over. Daniel looked genuinely afraid. I saw his eyes flick toward me, then back to his wife. Clearly he didn't anticipate that I'd be here too. Perhaps he feared I might beat him to a pulp. I stepped closer, not minding if the intimidation factored in. He held up a hand, backing toward the couch. Lisa, I'm sorry, he blurted. I messed up, okay? But we can work this out. It was just a fling. A stupid fling. It didn't mean anything. At that, a strangled cry burst from Emily. It didn't mean anything? She repeated, voice shrill with sudden hurt. She turned to Daniel in disbelief. You told me you loved me. All of us stared at her, astonished that she'd choose that response in this moment. Emily seemed to realize too late that she'd only incriminated herself further. She looked back at me with desperation. I thought... I couldn't help a bitter smirk. Well, looks like the two of you can't even agree on your story. Was it love or just a fling? Either way, it's over now. Daniel, perhaps realizing his misstep, tried to grab Lisa's hand. Honey, listen, Don't you honey me, Lisa spat, yanking her hand back. The venom in her voice could have peeled paint off the walls. You blew up our marriage, Daniel. There is no working this out. I'm done. Lisa, please, he implored, tears forming in his eyes now. Think of our daughter. Oh, I am, she snapped. I'm thinking of how she deserves a father who isn't a liar and a cheat. But since you made that impossible, I'm going to make sure she at least has a safe, stable home with me. You can be damn sure I'll fight to keep her away from your toxic influence until you get your act together. If ever. He looked stricken. Don't say that. I love our daughter. If you loved us, you wouldn't have done this, Lisa shouted, her composure cracking into anger and anguish. You had a wife and child at home, and you threw us aside for her. She cast a withering glare at Emily, who wilted under the contempt. Emily stepped forward toward me, wringing her hands. Andrew, can't we please just talk about this? Alone, she begged, tears streaming down her face. I know I hurt you. I know I was wrong. I wasn't thinking straight. I stepped back as she tried to reach for me. The thought of her touching me now made my skin crawl. Don't, I said coldly. Don't even try. We're way past talking, Emily. You blew up our life. Did you really think I'd just quietly discuss it over coffee? Oh, hey, honey. I happened to catch you cheating. Let's chat? She sobbed harder, shaking her head. I know you're angry, but I still love you. I never stopped loving you. Funny way of showing it, I snarled. You sure you don't mean you love what I provided? The stable home, the bills paid, the respectable image. I gestured at Daniel. Because it looks like you were perfectly fine getting your love elsewhere while enjoying the life I gave you. She opened her mouth, but no defense came out, just weeping. Seeing her cry might have broken me at one time, but now it only filled me with a grim satisfaction. Let her feel even a fraction of the pain she'd put me through. Daniel turned to me then, perhaps deciding to try some camaraderie. Andrew, he started weakly. I take full responsibility. This isn't Emily's fault. Don't you dare try to defend me. Emily cut him off, an unexpected edge in her voice. She wiped her face, anger flickering through her grief. I made my own choices. Her voice caught, and she looked at me pleadingly. It just, it got out of hand. We didn't mean for you to find out like this. At that, I felt a fresh wave of disgust. So what? Sneaking and lying was fine as long as I didn't find out? That was the plan. To keep me in the dark forever? Raise our son in a lie? Did you even think about Jason while you were with him? Did you think about what this would do to our family? Emily cried. I do. I hated myself every time I saw his face, saw your face. But I was weak, and Danny and I, we have history. It was like I was a stupid teenager again. I know it's not an excuse, but you're right, it's not, I snapped. Hearing her call him Danny with such familiarity made my stomach lurch. You threw away decades of our life for some nostalgia and excitement, and now you've lost both. Lisa moved beside me, arms crossed tightly as if holding herself together. Her voice came out deathly quiet. We're both filing for divorce, she said, cutting through the chaotic pleas and apologies. It's done. You two deserve each other, but you won't have us or our children. Daniel's face crumpled. Lisa, no. Let's talk about this, please. I can change. I'll cut off all contact with her. I'll do counseling, anything. She shook her head, tears in her eyes but resolve in her voice. Were you thinking of counseling when you were in bed with her? It's too late, Dan. You killed our marriage the moment you decided to cheat. Emily looked at me with abject fear. Andrew, are you really going to divorce me? The way she said it, as if it was unthinkable, almost made me laugh. What did she expect? Absolutely, I said without hesitation. Consider yourself served. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope containing the divorce papers that my lawyer had prepared and filed earlier that day. In truth, they would still need to be officially served by a process server, but I wanted the symbolic gesture. I tossed the envelope onto the coffee table in front of her. Adultery, deceit, destruction of our family, those are your parting gifts to this marriage. I'm making sure you get nothing else. She stared at the envelope, not daring to touch it as if it were a snake. Please, Andrew, she whispered, stepping over the envelope and trying to grab my arm. I can't lose you. I can't lose Jason. We can work through this. I'll do anything. Therapy, open phone, whatever you want. I was going to end it, I swear. Tonight, this was the last time, I promise. Her voice cracked in desperation. I pulled my arm free, heart hardening further. The last time? How convenient, since you got caught. I shook my head, feeling a surge of finality. There's no coming back from this, Emily. You chose him over and over again. Every lie, every sneaky meeting was a choice. Now you can live with that choice. At this, Emily seemed to collapse inward. She sank onto the sofa, shoulders shaking as she sobbed into her hands. What have I done? She moaned. I had to fight the instinct to comfort her. Years of habit and love, now unwanted, still tugged at me when I saw her like that. But I steeled myself by recalling the images of her and Daniel entwined. Daniel, perhaps seeing Emily falling apart, took a step toward her, concern on his face. Emily, he started, reaching as if to console. Before he could touch her, I stepped in his path, my glare stopping him cold. I don't think so, I growled. You've done more than enough. He swallowed and stepped back, raising his hands in a small gesture of surrender. I glanced at Lisa, silently asking if she had more to say. She stepped forward, looking at Daniel with a mixture of heartbreak and hatred. I'll be contacting a lawyer on Monday, she said evenly, though her voice trembled. Expect divorce papers soon, and don't even think about trying to fight me on custody. We both know our daughter is better off primarily with me. You can sort out your visitation once you prove you can be a decent father on your own. Daniel opened his mouth, perhaps to protest, but one look at Lisa's steely expression and he seemed to think better of it. Instead, he hung his head. I never wanted to hurt you, either of you, he muttered, glancing between Lisa and me. I felt a flash of anger so sharp it almost made me step toward him, but I held my ground. Yet you had no problem sleeping with my wife, I said, voice low. You're going to find out that actions have consequences. Lisa will take you for everything in the divorce. I then added, and as for me, I'm coming after you too. I'll be seeing you in court. Civil court. Hope whatever you got out of this was worth a few $100,000, because that's the kind of damages you might be facing when I'm through. His eyes snapped up to me, alarmed. What? You can't? Oh, I can, I said, a grim smile tugging at my lips. Look up alienation of affection. It's a thing in this state, and I'll be happy to spell it out for you with a lawsuit. That's right. I'm not just taking your mistress away, I'm going to hit you where it really hurts. Your wallet. He looked stunned. Clearly, he hadn't considered that his fling might come with a price tag. Emily, through her sobs, reached a hand out toward me again. Andrew, please, let's just go home and talk this through privately. Not like this. I stared at her, hardly recognizing the pleading, broken woman in front of me as the same person who had coldly lied to my face a week ago. There is no home for us anymore, Emily, I said, each word like ice. You destroyed that. The only thing left to discuss is the logistics. Where you'll be staying, how we'll tell Jason, and when you'll come collect your things, she cried harder, shaking her head in denial. No, no, please. I don't want to lose my family. You should have thought of that before sleeping with someone else's husband, Lisa interjected sharply. At this, Emily actually lifted her head and looked at Lisa with anguish. I'm so sorry, she gasped. I never meant to. Stop, Lisa said, holding up her hand. I don't want your apology. I don't ever want to speak to or see you again after tonight. You not only destroyed your own family, you tried to wreck mine. If you ever had any decency, you'll stay far away from me and my child from now on. Emily nodded wretchedly, unable to muster any argument. I realized I was done here. I had said what I needed to say. The shock had been delivered, the consequences spelled out. My heart was hammering and I felt a mix of agony and relief. Agony for the finality of it all. Relief that the truth was now out in the open and I could finally start moving forward. I looked at Emily one last time. I'll be at the house tonight, but I don't want you there, I said quietly. Go to a friend's or your parents' or, hell, maybe his place, I don't care. But I can't have you under the same roof right now. She opened her mouth as if to argue, then just nodded weakly. Okay, she whispered. I'll go. The realization that she was effectively being turned out seemed to crush what little remained of her composure. Lisa turned to Daniel with a similar hard look. I want you out of this house, she said. I'm staying here tonight. You can go stay with a buddy or in a motel. I don't care. I'll pick up our daughter tomorrow and we'll figure out a schedule after we speak with lawyers. But as of now, I'm done with you, Dan. Daniel looked like he wanted to protest, but the weight of the situation held him back. He simply bowed his head and murmured, All right? For a moment, none of us moved or spoke. The two cheaters stood there, defeated and weeping, their once secret world caving in around them. And we, the betrayed, stood strong, united in purpose, if not in joy. There was nothing happy about this, but there was grim satisfaction that justice, in some form, was being served. I finally broke the silence. Let's go, I said to Lisa softly, indicating we should give them space to process and to remove ourselves from their presence before emotions ran even higher. She agreed with a curt nod. Together, we turned and walked out of the living room the way we'd come. I paused just once, looking back over my shoulder. Emily had sunk to the floor back against the sofa, face buried in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Daniel stood above her, looking utterly lost, torn between wanting to comfort her and the reality that his own life was in shambles. The wine bottle and glasses sat abandoned on the table, a silent testimony to the night of romance that would never be. It was a scene of ruin, of consequences, of two people reaping the fallout of their betrayal, and it was exactly what they brought upon themselves. Without another word, I walked out, shutting the door behind me on the life I was leaving behind. Chapter 7. That night was one of the loneliest of my life. After leaving Daniel's house, I parted ways with Lisa at the end of the driveway. We exchanged a quiet look, exhausted, sorrowful, but also resolute. Take care of yourself, I murmured. You too, she replied softly. There was nothing else to say. We had won a bitter victory, and now we each had our own battles to continue. I watched her silhouette retreat to her car, then I got into mine and drove home in the darkness. Walking into my house, now just my house in my mind, was surreal. It was quiet, empty. The familiar furniture and photos seemed to belong to a different life. I stood in the living room for a long moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, my heart heavy and mind racing. The adrenaline from the confrontation was ebbing, and a crushing wave of sorrow swept over me. I sank onto the couch, the same couch where just a day ago, Emily and I had sat as a married couple watching TV. Now, everything had changed. I buried my face in my hands, and for the first time since this ordeal began, I let myself sob openly. There was no one to hear me. All the betrayal, anger, and hurt I'd been holding in poured out in ragged breaths. I'd lost the woman I once loved deeply, lost the image of the life I thought I had. Even if it was by my choice to end it, it still felt like a death in the family. After a while, the sobs subsided. I wiped my face, feeling emptied out. My eyes fell on a framed photograph on the shelf. The three of us at the beach last summer. Me, Emily, and Jason. All smiling with sunburned cheeks and wind-tousled hair. We looked so happy and normal. I wondered how long after that photo was taken did Emily start talking to Daniel again. Had she already been hiding her affair behind that smile? I stood and walked over to the mantel. Gently, I picked up the photo. My first instinct was to smash it, to rage at the falsehood it now seemed to represent, but I didn't. Instead, I slid the picture out of the frame and carefully tore it, removing Emily's portion of the photo from the rest. I set the part with her face down on the coffee table, keeping the piece with Jason and me. It was symbolic, perhaps petty, but at that moment it felt like reclaiming something. I slept in the guest room that night, unable to bear the sight of the bed I had shared with Emily for years. In truth, I barely slept at all, maybe an hour or two of restless dozing. Mostly, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the confrontation again and again. The look on Emily's face, the things we all said. Part of me was incredulous that it had actually happened, that this nightmare was real and not some twisted daydream. By early morning, I gave up on sleep. I made coffee and waited for the hour when I needed to pick up Jason from his friend's house. I knew the hardest task was still ahead, telling my son that his world was about to change forever. On the drive to pick him up, I tried to rehearse what I'd say. There was no easy way. Jason knew nothing of what was coming. Emily and I never fought openly in front of him, and I'd hidden my suspicions entirely. This would blindside him as much as it did me when I first discovered the affair. Jason hopped into the passenger seat around 10 a.m., grinning and full of teenage energy. "Hey, Dad, you're back early from the conference. Mike and I just beat the new game boss." He paused, noticing my expression and the heaviness in the silence. "Dad, everything okay?" I realized then that my face probably still showed the strain of the night. I pulled the car away from his friend's house and swallowed hard. "We need to talk, son," I said quietly. "Let's go home first." He grew quiet, sensing something serious. As we pulled into our driveway, he asked, "Is it Mom? Is she okay?" I parked and turned off the engine. My hands were shaking. "Your mom is safe physically, but there's something you need to know about us. Let's go inside." We sat at the kitchen table. Oddly, the same spot I'd first grown suspicious seeing that credit card bill weeks ago. Now the truth would be laid bare here. Jason looked at me with wide eyes, concern turning into fear at my unusual demeanor. I took a deep breath, reaching out to hold his hand across the table. "Jason, I'm going to tell you something that's going to hurt. I wish I didn't have to, but you deserve the truth." My voice shook despite my resolve. He nodded slowly, his hand clutching mine. "You're scaring me, Dad." I had to just say it. "Your mom hasn't been faithful to me. She's been seeing someone else, having an affair." The words tasted bitter and final. Jason's brow furrowed as if he didn't understand. "What? What do you mean? Mom cheated on you?" He said it like it was the most impossible thing in the world. I squeezed his hand. "Yes, she did. With a man she knew from high school." I continued gently. "I only confirmed it recently. Last night, I confronted her and the man together. It It got ugly. I'm sorry, buddy. I never wanted you to have to know something like this." He jerked his hand away and stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. "No, no, she wouldn't. Mom wouldn't do that." He was shouting, denial and anger crashing over him. "You're lying, or you're mistaken." I stood as well, tears springing to my eyes at having to shatter his innocence. "I'm so sorry," I said softly. "I have proof." I saw them and she admitted it. He stared at me, eyes glistening. Then he began pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. How could she do that? How could she do that to us? He yelled, voice cracking. I let him rant, knowing this pain had to come out. He fired off a barrage of questions, barely pausing for answers. When did it start? Who is the guy? Did I yell at her? Are they getting divorced? The last question hung in the air. I nodded heavily. Yes, I'm going to divorce her. We we can't stay together after this. He kicked the leg of the table in frustration, then winced in pain and leaned against the counter, burying his face in his arms. I moved to him and put a hand on his back. He didn't shrug it off, but he was shaking, and I realized he was crying. I'm sorry, Jason, I whispered, my own tears flowing freely now. I know it's awful. I wish I could take away this pain. He turned and clung to me in a fierce hug, like he was a little boy again. I held him tight as sobs racked his body. Between gulps of air, he muttered, How could she? I hate her. I gently stroked his back. I know you're angry. You have every right to be, but she's still your mom. She made a terrible mistake, the worst mistake, and she'll have to live with it. But you don't have to decide anything about your relationship with her right this second. Just feel what you feel. I'm here. We stayed like that for a while. Eventually, his crying subsided to sniffles. He stepped back, wiping his face roughly with his sleeve. What happens now? He asked, voice hollow. I cleared my throat. Now, she won't be living here anymore. Not as my wife, at least. We'll figure out living arrangements. You will stay here with me if that's what you want. I know it is for me. He nodded emphatically. I want to stay with you. I don't want to go anywhere with her. I had expected as much. At 15, he had a big say in custody decisions, and I was grateful we were on the same page. All right, we'll make that happen. We'll probably go through some legal processes, but I'll handle as much of that as I can. You might have to talk to a counselor or even a judge about your preferences, but I'll be right there with you. He looked down, anger flashing again. She broke everything, Dad. Our family. I can't even look at her right now. Before I could respond, the front door opened. I startled. Emily stood hesitantly in the entry, eyes red and puffy, a small overnight bag slung over her shoulder. She must have come straight here after leaving Daniel's, maybe hoping to catch Jason or me. She stepped in cautiously. Jason. Andrew, she began softly. Jason tensed at the sound of her voice, his whole body rigid. What are you doing here? He spat, glaring at her with a mix of anger and hurt that I had never seen on his face before. Emily flinched. I wanted to talk, to explain, to apologize. You think sorry will fix this? Jason shouted, stepping forward. You cheated on Dad, on us. How could you do that? His voice cracked with emotion, a child's anguish in a young man's body. Emily burst into tears. I never meant to hurt you, Jason. I love you so much. Love? He exploded. You call this love? You destroyed our family. Do you know how embarrassing and messed up this is? My mom? His voice broke, and he choked on his words. I looked up to you, Mom, and now I can't even look at you. She reached out as if to touch his arm. He recoiled like her hand was poison. Don't, he said coldly. I stepped between them, gently facing Emily. She looked utterly broken, and seeing her face to face in our home stirred complicated feelings in me. Anger, pity, heartbreak. But I steeled myself, remembering all that had transpired. I think it's best you go, Emily, I said firmly. Well, we've had enough for now. She looked at me with pleading eyes, then at Jason. Please, can we just talk? I'll do anything to make this right, I swear. Jason, I am so sorry, baby. Don't call me that, Jason snapped. I'd never heard him speak to his mother with such contempt. You are not the mom I thought I had. The mom I know wouldn't do this. Maybe you never were that person at all. Emily staggered as if struck. I saw her struggling to breathe through sobs. I made a horrible mistake, she gasped. I was selfish and stupid. But I'm still your mother, and I always will be. I love you, even if you hate me right now. Jason's face twisted in pain. He turned away from her, unable to even bear looking in her direction. I laid a hand on his shoulder, then addressed Emily quietly. You should leave. I'll contact you when it's time to discuss the next steps. But for now, neither of us wants you here. She opened her mouth as if to protest, but then her shoulders slumped in defeat. She nodded miserably. "Oh, okay," she whispered. She looked at Jason's back, wanting so badly to hug him or get some acknowledgement, but he remained turned away, fists clenched. "I'm sorry," she repeated one last time through her tears, and then she turned and walked out the door, closing it softly behind her. Jason inhaled a shaky breath. I pulled him into another hug as he trembled. "I'm here, son. I'm not going anywhere," I murmured. He nodded against my chest. "It's just you and me now, Dad." I held him tighter. "Just you and me. We'll get through this together." In the weeks that followed, the practical aftermath of the affair unfolded. Emily and I entered formal separation and began divorce proceedings. True to my lawyer's prediction, Emily did not contest much. Perhaps out of guilt or sheer resignation, she signed the separation agreement that granted me primary custody of Jason and majority of our assets. Given her infidelity, she knew she had no leverage to demand alimony or a larger share. I let her keep her own car and a modest portion of our savings, but I retained the house and everything in it. The life we'd built together now legally and physically belonged to me alone. She moved in with her sister in a neighboring town for the time being. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she was attending individual therapy and looked a shadow of her former self. On a few occasions, she tried to reach out to me with long apologetic texts and emails, but I read them only to confirm what I already knew. She was remorseful, she missed us, and she knew she had ruined her life. I gave short civil responses when necessary, sticking to matters about Jason or legal logistics. I felt no urge to console her. Her pain was the consequence of her actions, just as mine had been an undeserved consequence of them. Jason refused to see her the first month after the blow-up. He ignored her calls and texts, or sometimes read a message and threw his phone aside in frustration. I tried gently to encourage him to maybe talk to her once he'd had some time to process, not because I felt she deserved it yet, but because I didn't want him carrying that burning anger indefinitely. "She's still your mom," I told him one evening as I found him brooding in his room. "You don't have to forgive her now, or even soon. But don't shut her out forever. That hurt can eat you alive." He looked torn, and then he surprised me by asking, "What about you, Dad? Will you ever forgive her?" I had to think about that. Forgive, maybe someday. But forget? No. And I won't ever take her back or trust her again. Forgiving for me would just mean letting go of the bitterness so I can move on. I'm not there yet. It's okay if you're not either. He seemed to take that to heart. Eventually, he did agree to meet her for lunch months down the line. It was awkward and emotional, but he told me afterward that he mostly just let her apologize and didn't say much. "I didn't yell this time," he said, half proud, half sad. "She cried the whole time. I almost felt bad for her." I nodded, understanding. "She's still your mom," I repeated. "It's okay to care about her and still be angry. Those feelings can coexist." Meanwhile, Lisa carried through with her own plans. She filed for divorce from Daniel, and thanks to the evidence we shared and Daniel's obvious fault, she secured an excellent settlement. She kept their house, primary custody of their daughter, and significant child support. Daniel, I heard, moved into a small rented condo on the other side of town alone. He was reportedly distraught at being separated from his little girl, but he had no one to blame but himself. As for my lawsuit against him, I proceeded as promised. When Daniel was served with the papers for the alienation of affection suit, he actually called me once. I answered to a stammering, apologetic man who practically begged me to drop it. "Haven't I lost enough, man?" he pleaded. "I lost my family, my home. I know I was wrong. Please, can we not drag this out? It'll ruin me." I responded with the calm that comes after a storm. "You ruined yourself. This is just the bill coming due." He tried to offer a personal apology, but I cut it short. I told him to have his lawyer contact my lawyer, and then I hung up. Eventually, his attorney did approach with a settlement offer to avoid a court trial. It was substantial, enough to cover Jason's college tuition and then some. Ms. Willis, my lawyer, advised me that it was a fair outcome and that continuing to trial might yield more but with added time and stress. I decided to accept the settlement. It was, in a way, blood money, tangible proof of the harm he'd done to my family. I set it aside in an account for Jason's future and a small trust for counseling or anything he might need to heal from this. The rest I plan to donate to a charity for families affected by infidelity, a rather specific cause, but one I felt oddly passionate about now. When the dust settled, the life I was left with was both simpler and emptier. It was just me, Jason, and Max, ever the loyal dog, in the house. The atmosphere at home changed, quieter, a little somber at times, but also peaceful, in a way it hadn't been when lies lurked under the surface. Over time, Jason and I fell into a new routine. We cooked dinner together most nights, or ordered pizza and ate in front of the TV watching whatever we wanted. We turned the extra bedroom, Emily's old craft room, into a small home gym, a project that gave us a sense of accomplishment. One evening, about a year after it all, Jason and I were in the driveway practicing his driving, as we'd postponed some lessons during the turmoil. After a successful parallel parking attempt, he turned to me and said, "You know, I'm glad we're doing okay." I looked at him, taller, a bit more mature in the face now. He had been through a forge of pain and come out stronger just like I hoped I had. "Me too, champ," I replied, smiling genuinely. I realized it was true. I was okay, maybe even better than okay. The initial months had been hard, filled with anger, lawyers, and uncomfortable conversations, but in the end, I had what mattered. My son, my integrity, and a future that was mine to shape without lies or betrayal. Emily and I finalized our divorce without ever stepping into a courtroom. It was all done through documents and mediation. I saw her in person only once more during that period, at a mediated session to sign the final papers. She looked thin, drawn, a shell of the vibrant woman she used to be. She spoke only when spoken to, aside from a meek, "I'm sorry," as we parted ways in the parking lot. I gave a curt nod and walked away. Her consequences were still unfolding. I'd heard she lost some friends once the story got out, and even her relationship with her parents was strained. They couldn't reconcile how the devoted daughter they thought they knew had blown up her marriage in such a callous way. In a sense, she had lost almost everything that once defined her life. As for Daniel and Emily's grand romance, unsurprisingly, it withered quickly. Without the excitement of sneaking around and under the stress of 2 divorces and financial fallout, whatever fantasy they'd clung to couldn't survive reality. I was told by one of Emily's friends that the two of them stopped seeing each other shortly after everything went public. Perhaps they blamed each other for the mess, or perhaps the guilt was too much, or maybe there was nothing real between them beyond the thrill of forbidden nostalgia. Either way, they ended up alone, with nothing to show for their betrayal except regret. One Saturday afternoon, I found myself relaxing on the porch while Jason tossed a basketball nearby with a friend. I sipped a glass of iced tea and realized that a heavy weight I'd been carrying for a long time was gone. I didn't wake up with a knot in my stomach anymore. Our home was calm and honest. My son was healing. I was healing. Life wasn't what I thought it would be a couple years ago, but that was okay. In some ways, it was more honest and hopeful. Max patted over and laid his head on my knee, looking up at me with loyal eyes. I scratched behind his ears and smiled. I had been through betrayal and fire, but I came out the other side with my dignity intact and the love of my son stronger than ever. The price of betrayal had been paid by those who betrayed. In the end, I learned that revenge, in its own way, had a cost for everyone. But holding those who wronged me accountable, legally, financially, and socially, helped me reclaim my power and my life. I didn't revel in their suffering, but I also didn't shy away from ensuring consequences. And now, as I watched Jason laugh with his friend, I felt a swell of pride and relief. We survived. We were moving forward. The evening sun cast a warm glow over our yard. I called out to Jason that dinner would be pizza, and he gave me a thumbs up and a grin. Inside, the house felt like a place of refuge again, not a place of secrets. I set the table for 2, a simple act that made me content. I had been broken, but I was not defeated. In fact, in many ways, I had won. I had protected what truly mattered and emerged with my head held high. Emily and Daniel, on the other hand, were left with the wreckage they alone had created. As I sat down to share a meal with my son, I silently toasted to the future. Our future. Honest and hard won. The nightmare was over, and we had not only survived it, we had triumphed in the end.